In the show How I Met Your Mother, there's an episode where Ted and Marshall go to a Harlem Globetrotters game to root for the Washington Generals, the team that loses to the Globetrotters night in and night out. And that got me thinking, I wonder if there are other teams out there that could use a little encouragement, the ones that nobody comes to support. So in this episode of the Studio Review, I'll be attending 3 different events, including a Savannah Bananas game, for the sole purpose of rooting for the underdogs. In addition to offering some general moral support, I'm hoping that I might get to see one of these teams win, and that's actually not impossible, and I'll explain why in just a second. First, I decided to follow in Ted and Marshall's footsteps by going to cheer on the Washington Generals as they played the Harlem Globetrotters. Washington is actually the closest major city to me, so it makes sense for me to root for them as my home team. Although I did discover that the Generals aren't actually based in Washington, and the Globetrotters aren't actually based in Harlem either. They got their start in Chicago, and both teams are currently headquartered in Atlanta, but neither technically has a home venue, they just tour all the time. The tricky part was that all their upcoming games for the foreseeable future were out of the country, except for 2 in the state of Washington. And lucky for me, I needed to go to Washington on my quest for the best wings in America. So I packed my bags and traveled to a little town called Wenatchee. As I was selecting my tickets, I kind of stumbled across something called the VIP bench ticket, which, if I was understanding this correctly, would allow me to sit on the bench with the players. And I could choose either the Globetrotters bench or the Generals bench, so obviously I picked the Generals. I was planning on buying Washington Generals merch to wear to the game, but apparently this ticket also included a jersey. And you might be thinking to yourself, the Globetrotters always win. And that's what I thought too, but as it turns out, the Generals upset the Globetrotters 100-99 in 1971. The games are predetermined, so even though the Generals are kind of playing real basketball, they participate in a series of pre-scripted bits to make sure that the Globetrotters get to perform for the crowd and come out on top. During that game in 1971, the story goes that both teams kind of lost track of the score, and by the time they realized how far behind the Globetrotters were, it was too late to make up the deficit. The history is a little fuzzy here. Like in the 70s, the Generals played under several different names, so I believe this one was technically when they were playing as the New Jersey Reds, but there were also reportedly Generals wins in 1954 and 1958. And outside of that, the Generals have also beaten other teams they've played. My point is, a win for the Washington Generals isn't completely unheard of. It's just been a while. I arrived a tiny bit late because I was driving from Bend, Oregon, where I had rented a movie at Blockbuster the night before. They were just finishing up player intros, so I found my way to the bench where I discovered that I might be the only one doing this Generals bench experience. There were a handful of other people on the Globetrotters bench, but just me with the Generals. I would also say that this game wasn't like super well attended. The arena wasn't like super big to begin with, but it definitely wasn't sold out. The game started and we lost the tip, so already off to a bad start. At first I thought there wasn't a scoreboard, which would have been infuriating, but eventually I found it, and by that point the Generals were down 29-25 in the first quarter. They trailed by about 5 for most of the first. And when I say I was on the bench, I mean I was like literally on the bench. They told me to sit wherever, and I deliberately sat towards the end, but I had players coming back from the court and sitting on either side of me. At one point, the coach of the Generals actually came over and asked me how many people lived in Wenatchee, and I had to tell him that I came from Virginia for this game and had never been to Wenatchee before. I don't think he really knew what to do with that information, and I don't blame him. Soon after that, the Generals actually took the lead, so they were up by 4 in the second quarter, and I got my first little glimmer of hope. So from then on, I feel like I really started getting into it and cheering for my team. I was trying to tell them to get a stop and to help out on defense.
Hey, help out off the screen!
I wanted them to keep shooting threes because the Globetrotters weren't playing great perimeter defense, and I knew that those shots would fall eventually. All the Generals had to do was to finish the half strong. There was one player on the Generals, the guy who lost the tip, who was particularly nice to me, and we just got to talk for a lot of the game. He said that he'd been playing for the Generals for 9 years, and that it's been a really good job. He said it pays the bills, and it's allowed him to see the world. I had this theory that it was all the same pool of players, and you would dress out for either the Generals or the Globetrotters depending on what was needed, but he said that's not how it works. He's always been a Washington General. I also learned that there are actually 3 full Globetrotters teams and 3 full Generals teams, so that one set of teams isn't just traveling non-stop year-round. And then finally, I asked him the $1 million question. I asked if he'd ever, thought about mixing it up and going off script. He brought up the infamous game of 1971, but he also said the day that happened would be the day he retired. So I said, hey, why not tonight? Wenatchee, Washington, sold out crowd. He thought that was pretty funny. As a side note, I've had this idea for years for a screenplay about the Washington Generals where basically the guys have had enough and decide to band together and try to win even though they know they're all going to lose their jobs. It would be called Remember the Generals or something like that. If you're a movie producer and want to make that happen, email me. I'm completely serious. As he was getting ready to go back in, I asked him if they'd ever thought about running a zone because they were getting absolutely slaughtered playing man-to-man against this triple reverse play the Globetrotters kept running. And then I asked the ref to start calling technicals ankles, because at one point, like, a Globetrotters player took a shoe off and made a Generals player pass out from the smell. I also wasn't super thrilled about these sliding dribbles the Globetrotters were doing, because that seemed like a travel to me, but the ref actually responded to me and said that they never picked up their dribble, so it was fine. I'm not so sure. As it got close to halftime, the score was tied at 50, but then they paused to do some sort of skit thing, and when the buzzer sounded at the half, the score was 54-50 Globetrotters. I would have loved to have seen a replay on that, because to me it kind of felt like they just handed the Globetrotters 4 points. At halftime, I got to take a squad pic with the Generals, which is dope. I'm probably going to get that printed out and hang it in my office. It's okay that mine's not movie quality. I wish the fellas luck, and they went out to an early lead of 68-64 in the third. Going into the fourth quarter, it was tied at 72, and I know this is crazy, but there was still a small part of me that thought they might win, even if it was just on accident. My new friend on the Generals said he heard about one time when a Generals squad almost accidentally won, and all he would say beyond that is that they fixed it though. Apparently the guy who made the game-winning shot against the Globetrotters in 71 went on to say that the crowd reacted as if they had killed Santa Claus. So that's not exactly the outcome I wanted for all the kids in attendance, but I did want these guys to experience the sweet taste of victory, and it would be pretty cool to witness history. As the fourth quarter drew to a close, the game was all tied up 86-86. The Generals had the ball and a pretty good chance to take the lead, but the player went in for a layup and got rejected at the rim. So instead, the Globetrotters got the ball with a few seconds left and ended the period with a game-winning basket that put them up 88-86. As bummed as I was, I can't say that I was all that surprised. I think at the end of the day, the guys did appreciate the sport, and as absurd as the experience was for me to sit on the bench as a 30-year-old man at an event mostly attended by kids and families, it was fun to get to hang out with the team and get to know them a little bit. I was, however, still in search of that elusive victory, so it was time to move on to my next event. And for this next one, I wanted to switch things up a little bit. By the way, if you're watching this and this is giving you the itch to attend live sports, you're in luck, because this episode is sponsored by Game Time. Late summer is the perfect time to go to an MLB game, and Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. They make getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. If I pull up the app, I could get tickets to see the Washington Nationals tonight for $15. What I like most about Game Time is their all-in pricing feature, where right now I'm seeing the price that I'll pay at checkout. One of my biggest pet peeves is getting slapped with surprise taxes and fees at checkout, but I don't have to worry about that with Game Time. There's also this Game Time Picks feature where they'll show you the best available seats for the best price. And as always, you can see the view from your seats right in the Game Time app, so there's no need to wonder about what your view will be like. They've also got you covered with Game Time ticket coverage, which is the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets to MLB games, concerts, and other live events, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code REVIEW for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code REVUE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Speaking of tickets, I was recently in Vegas to try some Korean wings, and while I was there, I decided to pay a visit to a little event called the Tournament of Kings. It's a dinner entertainment show with like jousting and combat and stuff, and you're supposed to root for the knight that represents your section. It's similar to medieval times, if you've ever heard of that. I can't emphasize enough how little I knew about this show going into it. I knew that there were different knights corresponding with countries like Ireland and France and Romania, but when I went to buy the tickets, I also saw that there was a section called Dragon, and there was a seat available in the front row, so I snagged it. From what people said online, being in the Dragon section meant that you were essentially rooting for the bad guy, which is exactly what I was there to do. And after a quick Google search, I also read that there was an evil wizard named Mordred that made an appearance, and I was like, bingo, that is all I need to know. On my way into Vegas, I stopped at a Walmart to get some materials. I found some iron-on letters and this highlighter yellow t-shirt. I checked in at my hotel and then quickly ironed the words Mordred Fan Club onto the t-shirt. It was like a million degrees, but I threw on a jacket so that I could reveal my shirt when the time was right. My hotel was at the complete opposite end of Las Vegas Boulevard, so I took an Uber to the venue and showed up a few minutes late. I don't typically think of myself as someone who is like chronically late, but so far this episode would demonstrate otherwise. Fortunately, they were still doing some sort of introductory song or something, and I wasn't too late to get dinner. Dinner was an entire hen, some corn, potatoes, and bread. No silverware or napkins, you just had to eat with your fingers. As far as I could tell, Mordred had not made an appearance yet, which was great news. I kind of assumed that maybe the knights really competed and there could be a different winner every night, but as the competition started, it became clear very quickly that this whole thing was pretty tightly scripted. scripted. I think I saw one of the guys pull back on his horse at the last second so the other guy could win in a particular race. And on top of that, Dragon didn't even have like a knight in the competition to begin with. We were just like general antagonists. The lady beside me was super into booing all the other knights, which was hilarious. But for me, once I knew that we couldn't like win the tournament, this became more about just showing support for my guy Mordred. I mean, think about it. The man has to come out here night after night just to get booed. I figured the least I could do was to give him a little encouragement. And at long last, homeboy made his entrance to crash the party. The time had finally come to remove my jacket. I just went nuts. Almost immediately, I clocked several of the actors tapping each other on the shoulder and pointing over to my shirt. I couldn't have planned this, but I feel like the lighting in the venue made the neon yellow stand out like crazy. When I wasn't recording, one of the good guys came over and was like, "I don't like your team, but I like that shirt." Mordred left, and so did his henchmen. I think those are like the Dragon Knights I'm supposed to be supporting. I honestly didn't know they were affiliated. Either way, since Mordred was gone for a little bit, I took that opportunity to eat more of my game hen. And even though I wanted to focus more on positive reinforcement for Mordred, I did join the ladies on my left in booing the other knights because they were super into it, which was amazing. There was a lot of singing and dancing at the beginning of the show, and then they did like a skills competition, which was followed by jousting, and then finally hand-to-hand combat. During that part, this guy in my section shouted, "Make him suffer," which is a wild thing to say. Mordred came back, and at one point one of the characters said something to him like, "That's why you'll never have a seat here." And I felt like there was some backstory that I didn't understand. I don't know, maybe that was covered in the 10 minutes before I got there. I felt pretty good about supporting Mordred. He even came over and gave me a fist bump at one point. But then things took a weird turn when our team straight up murdered King Arthur. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, King Arthur is like the host of this tournament, but now he was dead and his son randomly had to like take over. So I'm like, yikes, am I here supporting a murderer? But at this point I was too invested to back out. Eventually the good guys killed the Dragon Knight to avenge the king.
Come on, skinny love, just last the year.
So I saluted to pay my respects as he was carried out by a bunch of really buff shirtless dudes, which that was really confusing. My theory is just that they were like reusing actors from other shows at the casino. To be honest with you, I think I lost the plot a little bit. I feel like it was lacking in depth and character development. I couldn't even tell you who won the tournament. I think France, maybe? I don't know. The rules were kind of unclear. But eventually they ended by crowning Arthur's son as the new king, and then they made us sit there during the coronation and take it all in as if they hadn't just killed our knight like right in front of us. That would be like making the fans of the losing team in the Super Bowl go attend the victory parade. Also, hold up, King Arthur was at the coronation, so he like wasn't even dead. Turns out we didn't murder anybody, but they definitely killed our guy. So I had no regrets about supporting Mordred. Mordred, by the way, was not dead, just the Dragon Knight, but Merlin, oh yeah, Merlin had a cameo. He like banished him by shooting real fireworks at him indoors. After the show, some of the cast came back out, and I asked Mordred if we could get a picture together. And he was like, "Yeah, man, I came out to say hi to you." The Dragon Knight came out as well, and we got to talk for a few minutes. I told Mordred I hope he has better luck tomorrow night. Even though this was the most scripted of the 3 events I'll attend in this episode, I think this one probably made the biggest impact. He said he's been doing this for 19 years, and no one had ever done anything like this. He seemed like genuinely psyched. He also said that they'd joked previously about flipping the script and winning before, but after 19 years, he doesn't think it's in the cards. There was this huge group of people waiting to talk to them, so we got a picture together, and as I left, I told them, "Hey, you guys are my heroes." And I don't know for sure how this played out, but it's kind of fun to imagine him going home to tell his friends or his family, like, "You're never gonna believe what happened at work today." After I got back from Vegas, it was time to head to Savannah, Georgia to root for a team playing against the Savannah Bananas. If you're not familiar with the Savannah Bananas, they're a baseball team that started out as a collegiate summer team, but eventually in 2022 they left to do their own thing. They're most well known for their antics, their dances, and their enormous social media presence. They have 8.7 million followers on TikTok, which is more than the MLB, and 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube, which is 5 times more than the largest major league team. Pretty safe to say that they're one of the most loved teams in the country. And as a result, tickets are hard to come by.
In fact, the wait list, this is real, for tickets is up to 2.5 million people, and this is also real. My sister and I are on it.
Part of what makes the Bananas so lovable is their mission to put fans first and to make baseball fun. They've modified a few rules of baseball and call it banana ball, which they describe as baseball in its fastest and most entertaining form. After leaving the Coastal Plain League, the Bananas have played a number of opponents, but their main rival is a team called the Party Animals. The owners also introduced a new team this year called the Firefighters. But for this series, the Bananas were playing a visiting team called the Aussie Drop Bears. And if you don't know, I have a special affinity for all things Australia, and I was actually able to travel there earlier this year to film film a couple YouTube videos. So I was particularly excited to cheer for the boys from the land down under. The Drop Bears had actually come to the US to play Banana Ball last year, so this would be their second series against the Bananas. The tricky part is that there's Party Animals merch and Firefighters merch available for purchase, but when I searched for Drop Bears merch, it was slim pickings. One thing I was able to find was this Drop Bears shirt on eBay, which I think must have been from the last time they visited the US. It wasn't quite my size, but it was the best I could do. I also found this Outback Steakhouse hat, and before any Aussies go sprinting to the comments, I just want to clarify, I am totally aware that Outback Steakhouse is an American-based chain and is not an accurate portrayal of Australia. Although I will say this, my review of the Outback Steakhouse in Brisbane has helped over 40,000 people on Google Maps, so you're welcome. And lastly, I bought a big Australian flag. I figured I could either wear that as like a cape or hold it up to show my support, so I made my way down to Savannah, Georgia for a Saturday night game. Unlike the Globetrotters, the Bananas aren't just barnstormers. They do tour the country, and they've actually been selling out MLB stadiums this summer, but they have a home field in Savannah, and it's called Grayson Stadium, and that's where this game was taking place. Grayson Stadium has been around since 1926, and a bunch of Hall of Famers have played there, including Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Hank Aaron, and Jackie Robinson. The Bananas were kind enough to give me media access, which meant that I was able to enter the stadium before the general public. I didn't entirely know what that would entail, but I got inside and I'm pretty sure I was the only person there who was not on staff with the Bananas. And on top of that, I found out that I would have access to the field and the players, which was absolutely unreal. One of the first things I got to do was listen in on a pregame meeting with the coach. After that, the Bananas started rehearsals where they practiced their dances and some of the celebrations they might get to do depending on how the game goes. I also got to see a little BP. The game I was attending was supposed to be game 3 in a 3-game series. The Drop Bears lost the first game on Thursday night 4-1, and the second game got postponed from Friday to Sunday due to weather. So the Saturday game would now be game 2 of 3 in the series. Heading into Saturday, the Bananas were on a 7-game win streak, and the Drop Bears, unfortunately, had yet to win a game of Banana Ball. On their trip last year, they lost to both the Bananas and the Party Animals, but I really felt like tonight was going to be their night. I should point out here that of the 3 events in this episode, this is the one where I'm most likely to see an underdog take home a win. So even though the Savannah Bananas rehearse celebrations and dances and try to do trick plays, the outcome of the game is not scripted in any way. And because of that, they actually prefer not to be compared to the Harlem Globetrotters. Here's what Jackson Olsen had to say about it.
The very common comparison we get is to the Globetrotters, and the main difference is the teams that we're playing are trying to win. We're all from heavy baseball backgrounds. We either played pro or college ball. We're playing to win. And the way that I kind of explain it is like, in basketball, you can throw that basketball for an alley-oop exactly where you want to throw it. You can throw it off the backboard, you can throw it off whatever, but once that yellow ball comes out of your hand, like there's nothing you can do to script that. If you can script that, then you'll be a Major League Baseball player and an all-star and a Hall of Famer. Like, there's just no way that you can do that, so that's kind of the way that there's literally no way, objectively, to script a baseball game.
I gotcha. How are you feeling going into tonight?
Pretty good. I think we're gonna win.
Okay. All right. Well, I regret to inform you, I will be rooting for the Drop Bears, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
All right. Hey, good luck.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The Bananas have a winning record, but their opponents actually win a decent amount. Coming into my game, the Bananas were 37-22 on the season. Earlier this summer, the Bananas played the Party Animals at Fenway Park, and the Party Animals won. Like, if it were scripted, it would make sense to have the Bananas win all of those big games. The Bananas staff were really kind and let me hang out with the team, go in the dugout, and even see the locker room. But since the Drop Bears were a visiting team and under different ownership, I wasn't 100% sure what type of access I'd have with them. And that's when I got introduced to Funky Phil. Funky Phil is basically a hype man for the Drop Bears, and I think technically their first base coach, although last year he also stole a base as a pinch runner. Here he is a week before this as Travis Bazzana got picked #1 overall in the MLB draft. Right off the bat, he was on board and said I was welcome to hang out with the Drop Bears as much as I wanted. Which honestly, I was just thinking that maybe if I was lucky, I could get a picture with the team or a couple of the players, but this was blowing my expectations out of the water. Phil invited me over to the visitors clubhouse where I was able to meet the team owner and interview some of the guys.
Tell me about Drop Bears in Australia.
Drop Bear, it's like an angry version of it's like a koala stepbrother. It's like an angry version. They hang in trees, and then when you walk past, they just jump down and get you.
Yeah, there's no real such thing, but is there? There could be. You don't know.
I
just in case.
Traveled to and returned home from Australia and didn't know that it wasn't real. I believed it 100%.
I'm not saying it's not real.
Okay, all right.
If you just stay away from trees, I think it should be all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's your confidence level? What's your mentality going into the game?
We're always confident. You know, we're Australian. We hit good the other night. We had more hits than the Bananas, so hopefully tonight we do it again and score some more runs.
The talent is exceptional. They want to make sure that the fans get the best experience they can get, which is Super important.
A lot of us are just like college guys, right? Like we're like a nobody. But here, like these kids look up to you like you are somebody, and it's one of the coolest feelings.
Well, I'll be rooting for you guys tonight, hoping that you bring
see you
home
repping the shirt.
That's right. I found this on eBay.
No way.
How do you personally feel about Outback Steakhouse?
Fun fact, I've never been there.
Okay, I don't blame
Never
you.
been.
Have you ever been to an Outback Steakhouse?
I have actually. Blooming Onion's not a real thing. That's a myth. That's actually a myth.
I've heard, just having a Barbie in the backyard is way higher quality anyways.
Yes, nothing beats that.
What do you say your chances are bringing home the win?
Tonight, yeah, good. We're ready to go.
Well, thank you for your time.
No worries,
I
Sam.
appreciate it.
Thanks for rooting for us as well, mate.
I'm excited. It's going to be a fun game tonight.
Can't wait.
I really wanted to do everything in my power to help the team win, so I gave a few of the guys some Australian snacks, including Vegemite and this snack called Shapes, both of which I had the chance to try when I was in Australia back in March. I figured a taste of home could help boost morale after a loss and hopefully fire them up to beat the Bananas. At some point it must have gotten communicated to the Drop Bears that I was making a video about underdogs, and so they had a little bit of fun with that at my expense. For a while, whenever I walked past, someone would shout something like, "We're not underdogs," just with a little bit more profanity. I refueled with some shapes of my own while the Banana Nanas got ready in the background. It was around 4 p.m. at this point, and there was already a line of folks around the block. This was still 3 hours until game time. Meanwhile, the Bananas were getting ready for the VIB experience, where folks are able to come in early and meet the players. The cool thing is that even if you just have a regular ticket, the players will also stick around after the game and sign autographs and take pictures, which is unheard of for regular ticket holders at professional sporting events. I should also add here that even though tickets go for hundreds of dollars on resale sites, the Bananas sell tickets for their home games for only $35. And that includes all-you-can-eat concessions. That is an absurd deal. Before each game, there are performances outside the stadium from the band and other performers, including DALTON MAULDIN, who plays for the Bananas but is also a recording artist in Nashville. DALTON was a super nice guy, and if you're interested, you can listen to his music, which I'll link in the description below. Eventually, all the players made their way through the crowd waiting outside, and then led a countdown to drop the rope to let everyone in. The majority of seating in the stadium is general admission, so there's a little bit of a mad dash as people find seats. I was surprised to see a handful of other people in Drop Bears gear, but I think they were mostly friends and family of the players. The forecast kept changing throughout the day, and it looked like they were going to be able to get the game in, so players started warming up. But all of a sudden, the sky turned super dark. The players covered the infield with the tarp while we waited to see if the storm would pass. The Drop Bears stayed busy signing autographs and playing a little cricket, which I do not understand the rules to. At one point, Funky Phil came and slapped a stamp of his face on my wrist, but I was so sweaty that it just kind of bled immediately. I just want to shout out the players and the entertainment team for the Bananas for a second, because they were working hard during the rain delay to keep fans entertained. There were games, followed by sing-alongs, followed by dances. It was just non-stop while everyone waited for a decision to be made about the game. Around 7:30 p.m., the call was made to cancel the game, and that was ultimately the right decision, because pretty soon after that, the skies opened up and it just started monsooning. The players stuck around signing autographs and taking pictures, and the staff were walking people to their cars with umbrellas. I stuck around just to see if there would be a break in the rain, which would allow me to get to my car. Eventually, everybody left the stadium, but not before the Bananas made a quick video in the rain. The Drop Bears also got in on some slip and slide action. The Bananas staff were incredibly kind and offered for me to come back the following day, so I accepted the inevitability of getting absolutely drenched and made my way to my car. The next day, the weather was clearer, but everything was still soaked from the night before. When I arrived back at Grayson Stadium around 10:40 a.m., there were already tons of people lined up outside. Inside the stadium, the facilities staff and players and coaches from both teams were hard at work trying to dry out the infield so it would be ready for a 1 p.m. game. This would now be game 2 of 2 in the series, the Drop Bears' final chance to defeat the Bananas. There was a lot riding on this.
It's a beautiful afternoon here at historic Grayson Stadium. After 2 straight games rained out, the Drop Bears are back to attempt to break the Bananas win streak.
The VIB experience was starting right as I got there, and this time some Drop Bears joined the Bananas to sign autographs. They did a few last-minute rehearsals, and DALTON performed again for the crowds who were waiting outside. To make sure I was 100% ready, I went ahead and put on my Outback Steakhouse hat.
Blooming Onion's not a real thing.
And finally, the team got ready to walk through the crowd and welcome them in. The players I talked to were all pretty tired, but didn't show it. These guys are professionals. I mean, Jackson literally had his car totaled by a flash flood the night before, but he went on to perform like nothing had happened, because some of these people people had waited years or traveled across the country to be at this game. Since my ticket was technically for the game the day before, I decided to let everyone find a seat first, and then I'd just stand wherever there was room so I wouldn't be like taking a good seat from some kid. There was actually an entire section in right field that I had my eye on. It was pretty empty because it was in direct sunlight, and most people opted for the shade because it was so hot that day. Just to be clear, this game was completely sold out, like all of their games are, but since it's general admission at Grayson Stadium, people can choose to cram into the first base bleachers or the shaded outfield section if they don't want to sit in the sun. I went to hang out with the Drop Bears one last time as the game was getting ready to start, and I saw that they had brought Bluey with them, which is hilarious. Funky Phil also came over and gave me a necklace with the Drop Bears logo and a banana and a baseball in it. I also noticed that he was wearing a shirt with his own face on it. Classic Funky Phil. I was still on the field as both teams were introduced, and even though the Bananas were the unanimous crowd favorite, I mean, how can you not be when your team comes out like this? I still tried to show my support for the Aussies. The time came for the media to clear the field, so I made my way around to the right field section just in time for the Australian national anthem. Since the Drop Bears were lined up on the third base line, the whole team was looking straight at me in right field.
Count to 3, I need you all to yell at the top of your lungs. Start the clock. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Leading off for the Drop Bears.
Immediately, I was struck by how quickly the game moves. I mentioned earlier that Banana Ball has a unique set of rules, and one of those rules is that the game has to finish within a 2-hour running clock. And another rule is that batters can't leave the batter's box, which makes a surprisingly big difference. The Drop Bears got a base hit in the first inning, so we were off to a pretty good start. Another big rule is that if a fan catches a ball, it's an out. So with where I was in right field, I was perfectly positioned to potentially rob the Bananas of a home run by catching a ball. If the Drop Bears hit one my way though, I would intentionally let that thing hit the ground. Anything I could do to help my team. 2 more important Banana Ball rules to know about. 1, you get 1 point if you win the inning. So whoever has more runs at the end of an inning gets 1 point, even if you scored like 5 runs. I think that also means an inning can end as soon as it's clear that one team has outscored the other. And 2, they don't do walks. So after the 4th ball, the batter is allowed to just sprint around the bases until every defensive player has touched the ball, including the outfielders. So at the end of the first inning, the Drop Bears threw 4 balls, and I was super confused because it almost looked like they let the Bananas score. But that's because one of the runners was able to get home before all 7 fielders could touch the ball, which put the Bananas up 1-0, effectively ending the first inning. In the second inning, the Drop Bears hit a triple, which put them in scoring position. The next pitch involved a little rehearsed dance routine.
Please, 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 don't prove I'm right.
How about the dance? Kellogg, Olsen, and Cox with DR in the background.
And somehow Jackson Olsen made the play of his life to throw the runner out at home.
Sabrina Carpenter taking over the world. What a play! Jackson from his tuchus throws home in time! And the Bananas infield going absolutely crazy around Jackson Olsen.
When the Bananas were up to bat next, Jackson went on to just absolutely destroy a ball. From where I was sitting, it looked way foul, but it was ruled a home run. The Drop Bears coach actually challenged the call, but there wasn't enough evidence to overturn the ruling. In the third inning, I got to see a backflip catch by Rack, Robert Anthony Cruz, and then a foul ball caught by a fan. Just to reiterate here, if that had been me, I would have dropped it on purpose to keep the Drop Bears alive. In the fourth, the Bananas played musical chairs to see where they'd play for that inning. And by the bottom of the fourth, it was 2-0 Bananas, so not looking super good for the Drop Bears. But my support was unwavering through the highs and the lows, like an unforced error in right field, and the Drop Bears throwing a runner out at home all the way from center field. When I watched back the broadcast, I saw that they introduced Andy Archer as the world's biggest Waffle House supporter. Had I known that at the time, I would have had a word with him, because, I mean, come on. I feel like the ball four sprint was really killing the Drop Bears on defense. The Bananas were definitely taking advantage of that and advancing runners like crazy whenever that happened. Before I knew it, it was the beginning of the 8th inning and I was starting to lose hope. The Bananas were up 4-0. The Drop Bears managed to get runners on first and second with 2 outs in the top of the 8th, but they weren't able to convert. The Bananas won that inning, and it was 5-0 heading into the 9th. So based on the earlier rule that you win an inning and get a point, I thought for a second that it was already over for the Drop Bears, because even if they won the 9th inning, it would still just be 5-1. But as it turns out, every run counts as a point in the 9th inning, so there was still a chance.
And we'll rise up. I like the waves. We'll rise.
The Bananas got 2 outs on the Drop Bears pretty quickly, but I was still hoping against hope for a late game rally. A batter named Adam Musto stepped up to the plate, a 6'4" third baseman from Sydney. And with a 2-2 count, he made contact.
This ball is destroyed. Adam Musto.
And I'll tell you what, from where I was standing, that ball looked like it went straight over my head. But somehow they ruled it a foul ball.
Some fans out there in the right field stands, pretty fired up. You see the Australian flag.
You can see me kind of throw up my hands in confusion there because that definitely seemed like a home run to me. I'm just saying, the ball looked way more fair than the Jackson Olsen homer from earlier in the game. So that foul ball made it full count. And then, the very next pitch.
And with that, it's pumpkin time for this Cinderella team from down under. And the Bananas keep their win streak alive. A tough day for the Drop Bears faithful, but they can hold their heads high, knowing they made a strong showing here in Bananaland.
Even though I went 0-3 in this episode, it was actually really fun to root for these guys. And if you're watching this and feel like you're on a losing streak, or maybe that people have written you off, I want you to know that I'm rooting for you. And if you don't feel that way, maybe you can be a champion of the people in your life who have been written off. The Bananas actually do that really well through their nonprofit called Bananas Foster, which is dedicated to celebrating foster families and inspiring others to get involved. I went ahead and donated the amount I paid for my Savannah Bananas ticket to Bananas Foster. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd love for you to click subscribe so we can keep hanging out in the future. It was cool getting to run into a handful of subscribers in Savannah. A huge thank you to the Savannah Bananas organization for being so hospitable. Thank you to all the players and staff who talked to me and gave me access at this game. And thank you to the Drop Bears for accepting me as an honorary Aussie for the weekend. Finally, I'd love for you to remember that even when it doesn't feel like it, it's going to be okay. I'll see you soon.